Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck Israel all day, every day. Fuck Israel till my last breath. Fuck Israel till I'm in jail or I get shot. Fuck Israel. Fuck Zionism. Fuck you and fuck you. Fuck Israel. That's it, man.
The golden era of the Jews is coming to an end. Now, why do I say this? Because it sounds so shocking. It sounds so hyperbolic and crazy and fringe. The reason why I'm saying this is because The Atlantic, a very reputable newspaper, recently published an article entitled "The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending." And I read most of this article. And the article talks about how in the United States there was this explosion in enthusiasm for all things Jewish.
Israel has flourished to become a constructive voice in world affairs. Her flag became a symbol of hope in a troubled world.
And this really took off after the Second World War, after 1945. Americans just went gung-ho. They loved the Jewish people. And there was just this wave of Jewish creativity, this wave of various Jewish artists, Jewish actors, Jewish novel writers, Jewish film directors, Jewish artists. And a lot of Jewish people really remolded and recreated American society. And it commenced a Jewish golden era in American history. And within that golden era, we saw films like Schindler's List. And when that film came out, I would say that it was in the peak of this golden era. It was this very, very successful film, extremely popular. It won all these awards. And to this day, people talk about Schindler's List. When that film came out, it was in the peak of the Jewish golden era in American history. But now, that golden era is declining as we speak. And that's why The Atlantic published an article entitled "The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending." It's ending. And you see it everywhere. You see the decline of this golden era everywhere. I remember growing up in the United States back in the 1990s. I remember seeing Schindler's List. I remember watching Saving Private Ryan. I remember how in the United States there was this immense wave of pro-Israel sentiment. If you were Jewish and you walked into an American church in the 1990s and in the early 2000s, people would just love you. They would say, "Oh, you're Jewish. You're related to Jesus. I follow the Jewish Messiah." It was really all symptomatic of this extreme enthusiasm for Israel.
All of us are Israel. Existence is Israel. Humanity is Israel. They're not the chosen ones because they are the chosen ones. They are the chosen ones because it's a choice they have made. I don't know and I don't care what imagination in their head about God, but they choose God.
If I condemned my father to death, then you should be worried. Because if it comes down to 15 million Jewish innocent people and 300 million Arab clowns, I will choose the 15 million innocent people who did not start this war. If I have to choose between 1.6 billion Muslims and a cow, I will choose the cow.
And this golden era really got bigger after the 6 Days War, when Israel defeated numerous Arab countries in one war.
The battle for Bethlehem is brief, bloody, and decisive. Some 40 Jordanian defenders were killed, the remainder fled. Israeli troops moved in behind tanks, while care was exercised toward all religious shrines. A church of the Nativity was untouched. Civilians soon joined Israeli troops in the street, and the town where the Prince of Peace was born quickly returned to normal.
And the American people saw the 6 Days War and they thought, wow, this is biblical prophecy unfolding. And the enthusiasm for Israel increased even more. And it was as if people were being drunk off of Jerusalem. And we see this golden era coming to an end. We see it declining. Now, all of a sudden, Holocaust denial is becoming more and more popular. Now, you see people all throughout Twitter, now known as X, expressing hatred to the Jews, expressing hatred to Israel. And you see, for example, Rabbi Shmuley doing debates, and you read the comment section for these debates, and you see that the majority of the people making the comments express their hatred, their animosity to Rabbi Shmuley. They don't like Rabbi Shmuley. They see him as some sort of a sicko, and he is.
Why did Israel create Hamas? Because by having this outside enemy that attacks, it helps unify Israel. I don't know if Netanyahu got set up, there was a stand down below him, or whether he ordered a stand down. There was a stand down.
Back in the 1990s, back in the early 2000s, if Rabbi Shmuley were doing those debates, the majority listening to those debates would have expressed support for Rabbi Shmuley. But now it's the opposite. And for so long, social media platforms were trying to suppress anti-Semitism. They were trying to put the lid on it. But just like when you put a lid on a boiling pot of water and you cannot stop the steam and the water from coming out from the crack between the pot and the lid, you cannot prevent a movement that has a substantial following and that continues to grow. You would have to really use extreme despotic measures to purge out an entire movement. You cannot get rid of a movement with sheer censorship. Twitter had all of these employees whose job it was to censor certain opinions, whose job it was to ban certain posts that were deemed dangerous or fringe or inflammatory.
Honestly, Twitter or X now is really where I get like all my news. Like I don't even resort to a lot of the mainstream media places, at least for breaking news. Like I'll find it on X. So God bless Elon Musk. I really think that he has really turned this culture around. So God bless him.
Well, Elon Musk came along and he bought Twitter out. And he unbanned Nick Fuentes, unbanned all these people who expressed their sentiment against the Jews, who advanced the agenda of anti-Semitism, advanced Holocaust denial. So that really goes to show that you cannot suppress a substantially growing ideological movement. And if you try to suppress it, eventually you will have someone who is very influential and very wealthy come along and advance that agenda, regardless of your actions in trying to suppress it and censor it. Some right-winger on Twitter, now X, said that Jewish communities have been fomenting hatred against whites, which is a position and a sentiment that is shared throughout all of the anti-Semitic ideological circles. And Elon Musk retweeted that quote against the Jews, against Jewish communities, and he said, "You are speaking the truth." And it just so happens that this same man, Elon Musk, unbanned the David Duke of our time, Nick Fuentes, and unbanned a whole bunch of people who were banned before for advancing anti-Semitism. So it really goes to show no matter how much you try to censor a belief, if it's growing tremendously, it will find a way to spread itself.
I want to know the full list of what I'm not supposed to fucking say. And I'm going to say everything on that fucking list every day. Give me the list. Give me the fucking list of what I'm not supposed to say about Israel, about what I'm not supposed to say about Jews. And you make that illegal, I'm going to say it every fucking day. And I am anti-Israel, period. I am fucking anti-Israel. Because the ADL, I know the ADL doesn't work for Israel. But if Israel doesn't shut their fucking dog down, which is the ADL, their little attack dog, they can shut them down tomorrow. Shut them the fuck down. I can't have the ADL and this law at the same time. I cannot have the ADL in business accusing people of being Holocaust deniers with this particular system. Fuck Israel. Fuck Israel. Fuck the ADL. This can't stand.
The decline in the golden era for American Jews began pretty much after 9/11. Because what happened after 9/11? You had the Iraq War. And the Iraq War was pushed by certain neocons who were up there in the political echelons of the Republican Party. And the article points to the fact that a lot of these neocons were American Jews, and they were pushing for the Iraq War. So a whole bunch of people caught wind of this, and they said, look, the Jews pushed us into war. The Jews are pushing us into having war in the Middle East, and it's only going to cause more and more problems for the United States. And of course, people said that this was anti-Semitic, and they still say this, but more and more people began to express this opinion.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it? I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
So right there, you have people saying, look at what the Jews did. They caused the deaths of 1 million Iraqis, all these deaths of these American soldiers, thousands of American soldiers killed in Iraq in a war that did absolutely nothing for the United States. It caused more terrorism. It brought destabilization in the Middle East. It led to the rise of Iran. And so people began to look at the Middle East and they began to say, well, who started this, right? So that belief that the Jews caused the war in Iraq went from being a fringe idea to an idea that became accepted by a huge portion of the American population. So it went from being fringe to being something that became ubiquitous. Because people saw the Middle East, they saw Iraq, they saw the destruction, they saw the death, they saw ISIS, and they said, man, what caused this mayhem? How did this happen? Well, 9/11, blah, blah, blah. It was a mistake in intelligence that led us to Iraq, because the intelligence sources were telling us that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein was behind 9/11 or contributed to 9/11. Saddam Hussein was helping Al-Qaeda. But then you actually look at the history of it, and you see how America supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and how that support for the Mujahideen helped to pave the road towards 9/11. And thus began the beginning of the end for the golden era for American Jews.
We found out there's a new restaurant that had opened that was run by the Israeli mob.
Oh, yeah.
And it was called Joey's. And
called America.
It was about one of their guys that
And this decline continued on, and it grew after the 2008 crash. And the article in The Atlantic talks about this. Although politicians on the whole refrained from casting Jews as the primary culprits for the 2008 financial crisis, which was in fact systemic, a sizable portion of the public harbored this thought. So the idea that the Jews were behind the 2008 financial crisis became popular. And the number of Americans who began to believe this grew to a substantial number. And the article goes on to say that Stanford University professors conducted a survey that found that nearly a quarter of the country blamed Jews for crashing the global economy. Another 38.4% ascribed at least some fault to the Jews. 38.4% after the 2008 crash. That is a substantial number, especially in the country that has been deemed for decades as the most pro-Israel nation in the world, as the second Israel.
Their people, the Jews, are better than all of us. They're better than all of us. And you need to accept that.
38.4% of Americans who were polled said the Jews played a role in the 2008 crash. So you have 9/11, you have the era after 9/11, seeing the beginning of animosity towards the Jews growing into a state of ubiquitousness. And then you have the era after the 2008 crash, in which you began to see more and more people harboring a sentiment against the Jews, blaming the Jews for the financial crisis. So 9/11, 2008 crash, these are the first two beginning stages of the decline of the golden era of American Jews.
Of course, when you are ill, you must combat the virus. The Jewish question is, it would be like a conference to speak about this. But worse than the Jews are the people which are, we say in French, enjuivés. How do you say that? They are Jews in the mind. Like, for example, the Catholic Church of France, which is officially for a massive immigration. I should say that the danger of the Jew is not the same as the danger of the Arabs. The Jews is the man who have, you will translate this in English, l'homme qui a ouvert les vannes du barrage.
Opened up the
doors.
The hole in the dike.
Yes. And water are immigration. But of course, we must fight on two fronts, but not with the same means, you know, because you go in jail immediately in France, for example, if you criticize the Jews. In the United States, the Jews are very good in foreign policy. The United States is dominated by Jewish foreign policy.
And then you fast forward to the Tiki Torch procession that took place in Charlottesville, in which you had Americans screaming, "Jews will not replace us."
Jews will not replace us! Jews! Replace us! You will not replace us! You will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us!
And that brings me to the next stage in this decline of the golden era of American Jews. You have the 2015 migrant crisis. And there was that video that went viral, I remember, during the migrant crisis, in which you had a Jewish woman for some pro-refugee organization saying that Jews will play a big role in getting migrants into Europe, and Jews will be resented for this. But if Europe does not become more and more racially diverse, Europe will not survive. And the fact that she said that Jews will play a major role in the migration of Middle Eastern and African peoples into Europe was used by people who hate the Jews to advance more and more hatred against the Jews.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
And so therefore, the Jews are behind the Great Replacement. The idea of the Great Replacement was it was something that came out of the French New Right. I think the name of the guy who coined it was Renaud Camus, something like that. And the Great Replacement is this idea that white people are being replaced by Middle Eastern people and by Africans and by other non-white nations.
I'm really, really worried that when the Vikings wake up, and if they see, okay, our country has been destroyed with Muslim mass immigration by these politicians, these journalists, and the Jews.
Right.
They will say, who must we get rid of? The politicians, the journalists, and the Jews.
Right.
People began to blame the Jews for the Great Replacement. So they said there's this Great Replacement and the Jews are behind it. And so that really was a subsequent stage in the increase in this phenomena of hatred against the Jews.
הבן שלי בן 10, התחילה בלגן בבית ספר אל ים. והילדים התחילו לשאול, מאיזה צד אתה במלחמה, מה אתה חושב על מה שקורה? ואז הוא אמר, אני עם ישראל, אבא שלי ישראלי. פה זה התחיל. פה זה התחיל ממש בלגן. התחילו להגיד לו ההיטלר, עשו לו עם היד, ציירו דגל ישראל, ולקחו נייר וזרקו עליו.
ילדים,
גם שוודים. גם שוודים, והם לא יודעים בכלל מה הם עושים. הלכתי לבית ספר, הרמתי שם את כל הכיסאות והשולחנות, אמרתי להם, אתם לא רק פעם אחת, לא פעמיים ולא 3, אתם לא מגינים על הבן שלי. ואיפה משרד הרווחה? ברוזנגרד. ומי יושב מולי? זאת עם כל התחפושת שלה, שבקושי רואה לה את העיניים. ולא אני צריכה להסביר מה קרה בבית ספר. אני לקחתי את כל הבגדים של ים, שיש כשל הארץ, או מגן דוד, או משהו בעברית, ושמתי הכי למטה בארון, שלא ילבש.
אתה מסתיר את הזהות הישראלית.
כן, לגמרי, לגמרי. אין לי ברירה. אין לי מי שישמור עליי פה. אין לי צבא. מי יבוא להגן עליי? אין לי פה אף אחד.
And so we fast forward to 2023, after the October the 7th massacre. Israel began to bomb Gaza. And all of a sudden, all of the anti-Jewish sentiment erupted even further. And it exploded. Why? Because, well, look, Israel is bombing this defenseless, poor nation that it has been occupying for decades.
הרגנו בהם, בלי נקיפת מצפון. הרגת, אז עשית דבר טוב. הייתי מוכן להרוג. אני אספר לה שאני הייתי רוצח. עד היום לא כשאתה אקדח, אתה הרג את כולם. יאללה, רפו אותם כמו חרות. בזמן קרב, אם מישהו הרים ידיים, משהו כזה, לא לקחתי שבויים. כמה אתה חושב אנשים הרגת ככה? לא ספרתי. אני לא יכול לדעת בחיי.
הוא תפס אישה, חתיכה צעירה, נכנס לבית אחד, הכין חדר מיטות, עם מיטה, פרטה לזיין אותה.
הילדה חזרה בית סמרטוטיה.
אחד אנס שם איזה ילדה בת 16, משהו כזה. אתה מבין? אבל זה מכוער מאוד. היה לנו בחור אחד, הוא נפטר, הוא היה פרא אדם. הוא לקח פשוט מאוד ורצח אותם בתוך המכלאות. חוטי ברזל כאלה, עגולים כאלה, אספו כל הגברים. הם יושבים שם כולם על הרצפה, ובא מישהו ולוקח תת מקלע ומתחיל זה, מחליף מחסנית, שלקחו את הלוויורים ורדפו אחרי חבר'ה ושרפו אותם. זה היה משהו זוועתי, וזה אסור לספר, אני לא אדבר על זה. מלחמה זה מלחמה.
People become euphoric at the idea of destroying Israel and of killing Jews. After the October the 7th massacre, in which 1,200 Israelis were murdered, there was a professor for Cornell University named Russell Rickford, who said, "I was exhilarated upon hearing about the massacre of Jews."
It was exhilarating. It was exhilarating. It was energetic. If they weren't exhilarated by this challenge to the monopoly of violence, by this shifting of the balance of power, then they would not be human. I was exhilarated.
And you have people on the left and people on the right who have expressed hatred against Jews, and they are using the war on Gaza, they're using the bombing of Gaza, the bombardment of Gaza, as a way to point more fingers against the Jews. You know what's so crazy is how you go onto Twitter, and this is really, really indicative of what we're seeing, what's happening, what's growing. You go to Twitter, now known as X, and you see so many people praising Hitler. It's insane. People saying happy birthday Hitler because Hitler's birthday was last month. You have people on Twitter saying, oh, happy birthday Hitler, Hitler's so great. All of a sudden you see praise for Hitler on Twitter. And this really exploded not too long after Elon Musk bought the platform. And it's just surreal to me because I grew up in an era when you had to learn about the Holocaust and you had to watch Schindler's List and you were expected to support Israel. Even if you were a Democrat, you were expected to support Israel. And now we have come to the point where people are praising Hitler. Really, all those documentaries on the History Channel about Hitler, they were all pretty much pointless. When people adopt a certain viewpoint, when they adopt a certain ideology, what tends to happen is that they become very biased. So a lot of people are hating on Israel, and their hatred is growing so much to the point that they are sympathizing with Adolf Hitler. They hate Israel so much that they wish that the Nazis had finished the job, because if the Nazis did finish the job, there would be no Israel.
Das Beispiel Palästinas zeigt, dass es besser sein würde, sich mit den vorliegenden Aufgaben zu beschäftigen und diese vernünftig zu lösen, als sich Probleme zu kümmern, die innerhalb der Lebens- und Interessensphären anderer Völker liegen und von diesen sicher besser gemeistert werden können. England wird noch sehr viel zu tun haben, bis es in seinem palästinensischen Protektorat auf ähnliche Ergebnisse wird hinweisen können.
Ebenfalls ist Herrn Roosevelt ersichtlich die Tatsache gegangen, dass Palästina zurzeit ja gar nicht von deutschen Truppen, sondern von Engländern besetzt ist. Und mit brutalsten Gewaltmitteln in seiner Freiheit beschränkt und um seine Unabhängigkeit gebracht wird. Und zugunsten jüdischer Eindringlinge die grausamsten Misshandlungen erduldet. Aber sie beklagen sich in andauernden Appellen an die Weltöffentlichkeit über die barbarischen Methoden, mit denen England dort einst seiner Freiheit liebendes und nur seine Freiheit verteidigendes Volk niederzuzwingen versucht. Vor einem gerechten Richter also und nicht durch brachiale Gewalt und militärische Mittel, durch Massenerschießungen, durch das Niederbrennen von Körpern, Sprengen von Häusern und so weiter.
Und unser aller Sache, meine Volksgenossen, erweist es, das dafür zu sorgen, dass hier nicht aus Recht Unrecht wird. Ich bin auch keineswegs gewillt, hier mitten im Herzen Deutschlands durch die Tüchtigkeit anderer Staatsmänner ein zweites Palästina entstehen zu lassen. Die armen Araber sind wehrlos und vielleicht verlassen. Die Deutschen in der Tschechoslowakei sind weder wehrlos noch sind sie verlassen. Das
Believe it or not, one of my favorite political commentators is not even officially a political commentator. He is someone who plays video games and streams for a living. His name is Asmongold. And he recently stated, I'm noticing a lot of people on Twitter revering Adolf Hitler.
Man, there's a lot of people that like Hitler now. Have you guys noticed that? I'm being 100% serious. Way more than a few years ago. Like, I feel like the Adolf Hitler fan group has grown by like 300%. There's been a lot of them. I think racism is coming back in a big way. No, I think that it already has. Yeah, bro, like people are just being racist nowadays. Like I remember back like 5 years ago, whenever somebody accused you of being racist and you said, no, I'm not. I just see things for what they are. Some other bullshit excuse. Now you tell somebody they're being racist and they're like, you're damn right. It's super common now. Haven't y'all seen this? Like, I'm not crazy, am I? No. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm glad. All right, so I'm not the only person here. Thank God. Racist against white people? No, I think it's other white people. Bro, let me tell you something. Like, if you ever see a Twitter account with, like, a Roman or a Greek statue, you are in for some serious racism. Like, that's where statistics get brought up. That's where it's like a tweet thing, and it's like a thing that, like, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like, those Roman statues, bro, that 1600s racism, yeah, they're bringing it back.
I think more and more Westerners are going to be saying Hitler was right. Hitler had something going for him. We need to go back to the ideology of pan-European militarism, or the idea of German militarism. And I think that this way of thinking is going to be a part of the revival of German power, because we're seeing the revival of German power. We're seeing Germany pursuing more and more of this policy of militarism, this policy of being independent of American power, independent of American military technology. And that's why we see the Germans pursuing independence when it comes to military technology. And we see the Germans building their own military industrial complex. And we also see Turkey. After October the 7th, the leader of Turkey, Erdogan, literally said, Israel, watch out. Our power is not limited to our borders, meaning we actually want to invade Israel.
بس عقل العاقل ودراكه بهاي الرحله شنو يشوف بدك هو القطع سمهم نحر حسين حز سيوف بس عقل العاقل ودراك.
The Muslim world, Iran, Turkey, looks to what's happening in Gaza and they say, we have to fight against Israel. We have to destroy Israel. And they are euphoric about the idea of destroying Israel. I foresee another Holocaust. And I think that this reverence for Hitler, this fascination with Nazism, I think it's going to play a role in that. People say, oh, never again, never again. It's going to happen again. And I'm sad to say it. I don't support it. YouTube, I do not support it. But I will say that sadly enough, it's going to happen again. And we are seeing the world turning against the Jews. All of the ideas that we said will never return back, all of the ideas that we said will never revive, they're being revived, everyone. Anyway, I've talked long enough. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.